It's Halloween season, and you know what that means. A time for horror games and horror films. Now, I know Sam Raimi's Spider-Man 3 is not exactly a horror film, but it does have a couple horror undertones. It also had other ideas that were eventually cut that could have made it more like a horror film, like Eddie Brock's original Death. Even Sam Raimi himself has directed horror films. So maybe some people might like to watch Spider-Man 3 during the Halloween time. Children could even be their favorite Spider-Man character for trick-or-treating, while adults may cosplay them at Halloween parties. In today's video, I want to talk about the third Sam Raimi Spider-Man film released in May of 2007. Some people have issues with those films in terms of character and plot, but what we're talking about here is the symbiote suit Tobey Maguire's Spider-Man wore. The film adapts the classic origin story of Venom, starting with Spider-Man himself. A black blob crawls on Spider-Man's costume, it turns black and white. As he wears it, it makes him more menacing, he realizes it's alive, he takes it off, and the symbiote applies itself to Eddie Brock, which turns him into Venom. While the film isn't one of the most beloved, there are no doubt some interesting things, like Venom having messy web patterns, which give him a more evil and monstrous version of Spider-Man, to the way they textured Sandman. Some of the battle scenes, the symbiote looking like it has various tentacles, all kinds of good things that came out of it. Although, one of the big criticisms of this movie is the design for the black suit. In most comic books and cartoon shows, it's mostly just black with white eyes, hand pads, and a large spider logo on his chest. In Sam Raimi's adaptation, they used the same pattern fabric, made it a different color, white webbing, and a different logo. Reactions to the suit were mixed. Some obviously criticized it for not being faithful to its comic book counterpart, while others believed it made more sense, considering it's mimicking a suit. There are some behind-the-scenes photos where they did try to make it look like the comics, using a latex material, probably used to create a comic book-like feel, and some sources say the filmmakers didn't go with it because they were worried about parents complaining about it being associated with latex fetish. When I first heard about it, I was unsure about how true that was. I mean, looking at how parents reacted to Catwoman from Tim Burton's Batman Returns, I kinda get it now, so there might be some truth to that. But still, there was just only one or two sources saying that, with no additional sources to back them up. And even if so, I don't think that's the only reason why they didn't use the comic black suit. Think about superhero costumes in general outside of Spider-Man 3. Captain America, Iron Man, Hawkeye, Green Goblin, Yellow Jacket, Leapfrog, the list goes on. When you're adapting a comic book suit in real life, you have to add some complexities to make it more stylish, because some costumes are just too simple, silly, or impractical for a live-action film. So, personally, I think the Raimi black suit makes more sense, considering in the comics, symbiotes are known to mimic any outfit. In fact, I have an interesting theory about the comic black suit and the Raimi black suit. Jim Shooter's Marvel Superhero Secret Wars explains how Spider-Man got the symbiote and why it looks the way it is. He and several other superheroes went to another planet to fight an alien menace. In issue number 8, Spider-Man was in a facility with Thor and Hulk, and they told him about a machine that could fix their outfits by just thinking about it. When Spidey took his turn, he came across the symbiote, it attached itself to him, and it became the black and white suit as we know it in today's time. He even mentions the reason it's just a black suit with a large white spider is because he was thinking about Julia Carpenter's Spider-Woman suit. When you look at it on Google Images and think about it, it kind of makes sense for that continuity. So, taking the alien's ability to mimic any outfit into consideration, The symbiote wasn't really mimicking Spider-Man's classic outfit, it was mimicking Julia Carpenter's Spider-Woman suit. Of course, the differences are that he has a full mask completely covering his head, and he doesn't have the long white gloves and boots. I'm not saying that if Spider-Man thought about fixing his classic outfit, the comic symbiote would have looked more like the Raimi black suit, with what's been done and all. However, I do believe in the sense of Raimi continuity, considering Julia Carpenter doesn't exist in that universe. I think it makes more sense for the symbiote to mimic his classic costume. Some could argue, just don't use latex, so some artists have photoshopped set pictures or make their own custom Raimi-inspired black suit without the webs and a bigger logo to basically use the same fabric and still use the comic book details. But still, I think it's just too simple and bland for a live-action film, and would prefer something with more style to it. In fact, there are artists who feel the same way, so they try combining the comic black suit using the large spider logo and the Raimi black suit using the webbing. Other concepts either extend the legs, making them go across the arms or around the lower torso, or just add more white details. Spectacular Spider-Man had the idea of evolving from directly mimicking his costume to the more classic comic black suit, as it starts to control him. The most notable detail you'd notice if you look closely is the decline of how much web patterns he has. Insomniac's Spider-Man 2 went with the comic black suit, and they added details to make it look like an armored exoskeleton, particularly the muscle-like lines and fleshy textures in some areas. When I saw the trailer for the game, it inspired me to create my own take on the symbiote looking like that, and this one, which I call Symbiote 11, is the one I'm the most satisfied with. It uses similar muscle lines, as well as armor-like textures on his legs and forearms. It uses a couple dark, muted shades of blue for the base, and lighter shades for the highlights. Heck, in Jonathan Hickman's Ultimate Spider-Man, Richard Parker II gets the black suit, and it has a messy web pattern, as much as it uses the large spider logo like the previous interpretations. From the looks of it, it's not just live-action films in today's culture, but also modern 2D animation and recent comic books to add complex details. Though I guess not as complex as the movies. Now let's take a look at a couple other characters. Enter Captain America. In the film Captain America: The First Avenger, we can see the first costume Steve Rogers wears is a direct rip of the one that Stan Lee and Jack Kirby first created for him using real fabric. It may look, quote, cheesy and dumb, but that's the point, considering the film's set in the 1940s and it's only the beginning of his career. In following films, however, such as The Avengers and Winter Soldier, set in the 2010s, he wears costumes that genuinely look more like a military suit. Some even argue they could be inspired by Ultimate Captain America's suit from the early 2000s. For Leapfrog, I think this is a pretty obvious one. Having seen clips of his appearance in She-Hulk, some say he kind of looks like a Power Ranger, while I think he looks a little bit like a ninja, but I'm okay with it because I've seen how he looks in the older comics. When you take a look at it and bring it into today's culture, if you were to make a direct adaptation of his comic book suit, he might look like a theme park character. I mean, She-Hulk in the episode featuring Leapfrog might be silly, but it's not as silly as it was in the 1960s. For Jamie Foxx, as Electro, Mark Webb originally started with the Ultimate Incarnation where he used blue electricity for The Amazing Spider-Man 2. When he returned for No Way Home, the filmmakers found a way to adapt the classic green and yellow suit. They completely swapped the green Lycra-looking bodysuit with a more electrician-based outfit and a couple of wires and generators attached to him while still keeping his lightning yellow. Whenever he uses his powers, his iconic electric mask activates. Speaking of, I referenced the No Way Home take and used a green jumpsuit, using the complexity from the film while still maintaining some of the comic book details. The list goes on and on and on. At the end of the day, going back to the latex symbiote suit Sam Raimi almost used, and with all the examples I've highlighted, I think it's safe to say that the sexualization rumor can't be the only reason why they didn't go with the comic symbiote, regardless of how accurate it is. You may be entitled to prefer whatever you prefer, and I don't expect you to appreciate the overall Raimi black suit more, but one thing I think we can all agree on is that sometimes you need to add some extra details for other costumes, as it can add more to the characters.